Jaime, welcome. Great to have you with us.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
It feels a bit quick to have another major upon us, but that's the world we live in now.
Yes. Well, there's such an afterglow from Rory's victory that it seems like it just happened yesterday. It was so vivid and so stunning. And I think there's a lot of eagerness to see how Rory's going to perform on the heels of that, because it feels perhaps mentally he's turned a page, and some of that pressure, self-induced, but also just so much public pressure has lessened, obviously, because he's achieved something historic, and he's got to feel very satisfied and gratified, and I think liberated in terms of his outlook towards golf right now. I think he's, as we say over here, it's all gravy from here. I think, at least for the short term, he's going to be riding a high, and whether that'll cause him to feel, a lack of concentration because he's just so satisfied, and which I actually anticipate it'll increase his focus and his desire, and I think he's always played better when he's relaxed and free, and he's got that bounce in his step, and I'd be surprised if that's not even more evident now.
You've been around him a long time, and you've covered all of the game's great players, really, at relatively close quarters. Your impressions of McIlroy, Jaime, as a person down through the years?
Oh yeah, he's such a likable person, obviously, and amiable, and I don't know him well at all, but he's just always unfailingly polite and unfailingly thoughtful, and considerate of the writers. That when we talk to him, I think he wants to give a good answer. He wants to really engage the question, because I think he's genuinely interested in the game and enjoys sort of, I think, being a spokesman for the game. But as a person, I feel like he does care a lot about what people think, and he wants to please his fans, and he knows he has many of them. And I think that has sometimes been a burden. I related to Arnold Palmer. Arnold Palmer really felt like, gosh, I'm doing it for these people, and look how many of them want me to win, and if I don't, I'm letting them all down. And I thought Rory had a little of that, which can be an incentivizer, but it can also be, a bit of extra pressure. And so I felt like that sometimes hurt him, not in anything, overt ways, but just something. It's a little better to be a bit sociopathic when you're a professional athlete, and he's not. And so it's I think another reason people like him so much is because, hey, he seems to care about us. But he's just brilliant in terms of the gifts that have been given him. He wants to make the most of those. I think he's, very grateful and indebted to his parents. And I think he just feels like, man, I'm put on this earth here to really excel at this game. And also, I love this game, and I want to make history. And all that, makes you feel like, well, he really, really wants to win. And at times he's gotten in his own way. At the same time, the way he's always taken his defeats shows a really well-balanced person, and someone who can handle, the adversities of life. Even though he has, I think he would say even that he's had kind of a soft road relative to most average people. But still, when you're a famous, professional athlete, your disappointments are exposed to everyone. And I think he really handled them well. And the Masters was really a manifestation of that, because Pinehurst could have been really devastating. And I know it was short term, but he didn't let it linger. And he used it for, growth as a player, which I thought that was very admirable. And it was a big part of why everybody was so excited for him at the Masters.
On his lack of a sociopathic streak, he has been subject to his fair share of armchair psychology over the past decade, Rory.
Yeah, I just gave some, sorry.
No, but it's hard not to. He's such an open book. You feel like, I have a pretty good feeling for this guy, and here's my take. That was used as, not necessarily a stick to beat him with, but as a rationale for why he wasn't getting over the line. He was not a killer. He was not a killer like Tiger. That was one of the great refrains about Rory, and yet somehow he's managed to get over the line here.
Yeah, I think he's learned how to compartmentalize that part of the competitive athlete that can perform without losing himself, which is not easy. I remember saying on last year at Pinehurst on Saturday. I said it, and I kind of regretted saying it. I said, Rory doesn't like a street fight, and in a way, that was a criticism of what an athlete should want. He should want, at least in the arena where it's bloodless, especially golf, to just be all out and care about nothing but victory. And DeChambeau seemed to have that verve and that extra sort of edge that helped him as it helped Tiger. And I think it was a little unfair because I think Rory's himself, and you don't want to try to I think artificially impose some kind of different personality on yourself just to look like you're suddenly trying harder. I think he had to find his own way. And what I said at the time on Sunday, and I'm glad I said it actually, was, after all this and those short putts missed and the loss and how well he played at Pinehurst, and how unfair it all seemed, that he's still going to love the game. And I think it sounded a little namby-pamby, but I really feel like the guys who are resilient are the ones who love it, and they love the whole part of it. And that includes the losing, and includes all the pressure, and includes all the, the feelings of inadequacy sometimes. Because when you do overcome that, when you do, kind of defeat your demons, so to speak, it's just all that more gratifying. And I think it also prepares you to be better the next time. That, look, this is awful, it hurts, but I can handle it. It didn't destroy me. And as a result, I think, God, he had plenty of times, we all, kind of, we're living and dying with him. He had plenty of times to throw that Masters away, and almost did. And yet he didn't. And I think just that extra bit of, grit that he had, I think, sort of applied a layer to his body, to his mentality through Pinehurst. And other losses like LA and St. Andrews and others, it matured him. And I think he's been a slow mature as a golfer because he is so gifted. It's been easy for him growing up to just beat everybody by being better.
Yeah. But
there's those extra dimensions mentally that maybe didn't come as easily to him because he didn't have, those opportunities to sort of get the self-examination. Gee, I need a little bit more. And that was really, I think, vivid for him after Pinehurst. And, he's 36 now, but I really, and that's not always, it's been the prime in the old days that guys would be better as they got into their 30s because the mental would catch up with the physical. We're seeing guys come out now very precocious mentally, and Tiger was the greatest example. But I think in Rory's case, because he is such a really, vulnerable, openly vulnerable person, he doesn't necessarily, take on those qualities easily that make someone quote unquote a killer. And so I think he's found a way to do it for himself, and I think he's going to be better going forward here. I really do. I think he looks so youthful, and his body's free of injury, and his swing is getting better all the time, and I think he's more well-rounded as a player, just in terms of the technical stuff and the skillful stuff. But I think as a person, he's got the mental part of it, not obviously not conquered, but he's made great strides in it, because I don't think he was as developed as most past champions with that aspect, in part because he is such a nice person.
Wow. That is so insightful. That's super interesting. Yeah. Everything you say there chimes and rings true. I've never heard someone articulate it so well.
Well, that's nice, Joe. Thank you. I know you guys know him better, and
no, but I
understand the psychology.
Yeah, but I dare say you're right about the slowness to mature because of the awesome talent. It wasn't relied upon. The mental side as often through his formative years. And I guess a final thought. I mean, we had presumed it was this humongous burden on him, the Grand Slam, and he had alluded to it, and he'd acknowledged it was a big thing. But geez, it was only when you saw him hold the putt and drop his putter and fall to his knees and almost hyperventilate. And then as he, it's like cinematic now, the walk from the green to the 18th. I mean, you can see, everybody in their mind's eye listening can see the walk, and he's looking at the sky and puffing his cheeks and struggling to gather himself. It was a real moment of, oh man, I knew this was weighing on him. This was really weighing on him in a way, like it's hard almost to articulate.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it just was such self-validation. I think because he'd gotten in his own way. And that's always, I think, the most gratifying thing and the greatest relief, because you hate to be the reason for not achieving. And I guess we all are to some extent, but in golf, it's even more vivid because you really are alone with your thoughts, and you're really just conquering yourself and the golf course, and the other players are doing their best, but you're really not connected to them. I mean, you can watch them and you can feel, oh my God, that's Tiger Woods or whoever, but it really shouldn't matter. And I think his work with Bob Rotella, I think, would emphasize that. You are in your own vacuum. You do control your thoughts. You do have this ability to not be defeated by the externals. So when you are alone with your thoughts and you feel like you're not, as I said, getting in your own way, when you're stopping yourself, and that usually is what happens in golf. That's what makes it so frustrating. And when you're so good and you're on the precipice of so many historic things and you're not achieving them, I have no idea what that's like in terms of, except to sort of imagine that that was very frustrating and really gratifying when he got past it. And there's so many great photos of that moment at the Masters. And there's one in particular where even Harry Diamond's out of the photo and Rory's just down there, kind of kneeling, almost prostrate, on the green, prostrate on the green, excuse me. And the throngs around them are all standing up, all their arms are up. And it just looked like a religious almost, experience, not for him. So I mean, just the vision of it was, I would imagine Gandhi might have, been portrayed as in some of those incredible moments he had with so many followers. It was really emotional for that reason, just that everybody connected to it, because I think they were all identifying with Rory. We've all gotten our own way in our own little ways. And it was great, just to vicariously live through that with him.
You said your hunch was that this will be a prompt now for him to win more majors. And I guess that is one of the very popular theories now, that he will play unburdened, and we're going to see him kind of unleash his talent on the majors over the coming years, and he'll win not one, not two, who knows, maybe more. I guess the other danger is that he is somehow sated deep down, and motivation becomes an issue. And he's got a full life away from the golf course. We can look to history for clues, and golf is just so interesting in that respect, that we have on one end of the spectrum, from the age of 35 on, we have Nicholas, who won 6 times. We have Phil, who did all of his work really in his 30s and 40s, and even one in his 50s, who won 5 times from Rory's age on. Now, if Rory replicates 5 times, he hits 10 majors. It's incredible. And by the same token, you have other great players. Palmer never won again after 35. Tiger, particular set of circumstances with Tiger, of course, but only won once. And somebody like Watson, who, as late as Turnberry in 2009, was still competitive, never won again after 35. Golf has the whole spectrum there for Rory to fall into. It's fascinating. Do you have any great sense why some do and some don't, or is it all too particular?
Gosh, yeah. It is fascinating. And I've heard both theories about Rory from very well-placed and astute golf people, so to speak. And, teachers who think that, no, he'll be, as you say, satisfied and he won't have the drive any longer. And then others who feel like, I kind of feel more in this camp, that he's liberated. I think it comes down to, of course, with Arnold, who, I think you compare him to Rory in many ways in terms of the way that he is received by people. He was trying really hard, again, to satisfy others. But, he had Jack Nicklaus in front of him, and he might have won a few more had Jack not emerged. However, it's so individual, and I don't think there's an answer, even from the person themselves. They don't. When you do talk to some of the greats after it's over, they're not always sure themselves why they won and why they stopped, or why they started winning after not winning. Certain things click, but sometimes it's just accident that happens, and then it maybe changes you in a way. Arnold had some really difficult losses. I mean, at Olympic Club in 1966, Billy Casper, he lost a 7-stroke lead on the last 9. He lost 3 playoffs overall for the U.S. Open. I think his game was a little limited, as great as he was. And a lot of it relied on putting. And he stopped smoking in 1965, which sounds kind of silly, but he never won again a major. It never quite was the same. And in his autobiography, he talked about it. He felt a little shaky in pressure moments. So, just bringing Arnold as a point to show how nuanced it can all be. But I think if there's one through line for me is, how much do you love competing, and how much can you handle the entirety of the game, and just accept whatever it gives you, and be grateful that you're this good at it and you have this opportunity, and that if you lose, there's always a next one, as long as you're good enough physically. And I don't think there's any question Rory can stay good enough physically, I would say, for 10 more years. Now his peak may be, within the next 2 or 3, but he's still got enough game to continue on, especially as he gets more skillful in these little areas where he used to make a lot of soft bogeys with, kind of indifferent chipping or, short putting. He's gotten better at that because he understands the importance of it more, I think. So I guess what I'd say is, Phil loved to compete.
Yeah.
And he loved performing, and he loved being a show off. And I think that's something that all the superstars have. They love to show off their talent. And Rory's now in a place where, he's not going to get criticized ever again quite as hard. He's past that now. He's proved himself completely. I just think it's going to be more fun. And I think he's going to just let himself play. And if it doesn't happen now, I'm a Grand Slam winner. It doesn't feel as if that's going to burden him any longer. It's not going to inhibit his joy. And I could be wrong that, gosh, there's a whole life to live out there without golf, and maybe he wants to do that. But what I found is, and I think the PGA Tour Champions proves this, and then later on with talking with someone like Nick Faldo, who gave it all, and and then when he left, left the scene, he thought, well, this is all, now I get to live the rest of life, and I think Nick's very happy actually, but he misses it.
Yeah,
every one of them misses it. So as long as you have it, use it to the hilt. And I think Rory's wise enough to know he will regret it if he doesn't really, continue even with more kind of direction towards this greatness that is really, obviously there already, but he can really enhance it going forward.
I'd never heard that about Palmer and the smoking.
Yeah.
Wow. Funny.
It's a good book. I mean, his biography, autobiography, I should say.
The USPGA, the poor relation of the 4 majors. Still a major, still big, but the poor relation. It's never going to get away from that, is it? It can, people often have kind of, well, let's talk about the USPGA and its lack of identity and what can it do. I don't think there's that much it can do, because the other 3 are just so ensconced and have they're such a clearly embedded identity. And the USPGA, its identity is it's the 4th major. Like it or not, that's its identity.
It's not a bad thing. I think because of the schism in the game right now, the majors have taken on more importance. So if you're one of them, if you're one of the 4, regardless, you're more important than you've ever been. And if you win a major, I don't think people qualify and go, well, he won 2 PGAs. It's not. No, it's a major. It counts. That's it. Period. It goes towards the Hall of Fame. It goes towards everything. Having said that, yeah, the PGA's had a mixed history, literally by being match play until 1958. And once it went over to stroke play, it had kind of an uneven start because it went to golf courses that weren't, the renowned ones, the historic ones. And I think we all learned that, venues matter. when the Open Championship goes to St. Andrews, it's bigger. Augusta has capitalized on the aura of its golf course, built by Mackenzie and Jones, and it just, we know every hole, we know every nuance now. That enhances the experience. The U.S. Open has always gone to the classics. The Golden Age classics. They had a couple of departures from that, but I think they've gone and tried to stay with that. So where does that leave the PGA in terms of its venues? And it did improve its venues, but it also has a different setup, not quite as stringent, in which the players like. They feel it's more fair, but I think it takes a little of the edge off the aura of the event. So, the PGA would go to Golden Age American courses, but they were slightly easier. And just because the rough wasn't quite as deep and the greens weren't quite as fast and firm. Now, as they then kind of try to adjust and become more fast and firm and deeper rough. And then it looked like it was too much like the U.S. Open to have its own identity. So last night on Golf Channel, we were talking about it. And I thought there are courses that are modern and visually stunning, like, let's say, Whistling Straits, which I don't think people think is necessarily Pete Dye's greatest architectural strategic test, but it's just dramatic as heck visually. And I think of the PGA as having that niche, perhaps.
Yeah.
If they went to more of those, and there aren't that many of them, but if you, like Chambers Bay has that in Washington, near the water, and really, very humpy and really looks really natural, even though it's built on I think an old sand mine.
Well,
but they could do anything they wanted with the land. Anyway, the point being, Kia was like that. They already played Kia.
It's funny. I was just going to say that for me, that's the one, because if you take the last number of years, Xander winning at Valhalla, Brooks then won at Oak Hill. A lot of American winners, by the way. We're going back to Jason Day in 2015. Brooks winning at Oak Hill, and Justin Thomas holding off Zalatoris in 22. And then 21 was famously Mickelson, of course, but at Kiowa.
Yeah.
Now, I would say, and I watch golf 50 weeks of the year, I'll be honest, if you showed me Valhalla, Oakland Hills, Wells Fargo, just, a few photos, a hole or two, I'm not spotting the difference. It's not jumping off the TV screen to me. Whereas at Kiowa, by the Thursday night at Kiowa, the holes are so distinctive and interesting that by the end of Thursday, I knew this almost as well as Amen Corner, some of the big holes. And by Sunday, I was in love with the place. And honestly, if you'd said to me, we're just going to come back here every year, I'd be all in for that. I think choice of course and how it looks on TV, I don't know if it's underestimated and it shouldn't be number one on the list, but geez, it should be really high up.
Well, I agree with Joe. And I think if you're talking about identity, that would help establish an identity. And to me, Pete Dye was one of the greats, and so accessible when he was alive, to talk to about it. And what you just said would really have been music to his ears. He loved that people, could identify his style and remember it, so well, because it does make an impact. And I think that's why the Players Championship has been so successful. The finish and Pete knew how to challenge players and make them. He knew what they were afraid of, and he tried to put that into his design, especially at the end of the tournaments. So yeah, I think I'm not saying just Pete Dye courses, but anything that has that kind of modern look, that modern edge, those angles, the kind of Picasso-esque, kind of lines, I think could be something that, oh yeah, that's a PGA. That's not a U.S. Open. That's a PGA. But having said all that, I don't think there's a huge problem. And I agree with you. There's not a lot they need to do.
No.
But if we want to end that question, if they want to end that question, that might be a direction to go in.
Some of the other contenders, I'll come to Scotty in a second, who's many people's favourites now that he's kind of sharpened up his game again. Bryson DeChambeau obviously went out in the final round of the Masters with McIlroy. My memory, and I think statistically it's backed up, of his performance at Augusta is that he putted well. His short game, once again, was immense. His driving was very good. But his iron play was borderline dreadful at times. He said he was having a problem with side slopes, and that is not a problem you want around Augusta. But, that would be less exposed probably on at Quail Hollow, and I presume he's probably done work to rectify it over the last couple of weeks as well. So he strikes me as a colossal contender. He has also been a colossally interesting person over the last couple of years. I would love to know what you make of him and of his newfound popularity, because whilst I'm happy for somebody who was almost borderline bullied at a certain point not so long ago by the other players, and Koepka in particular seemed to lead that charge, and that was not nice to see, and I hated that at the time. I do find there is something very manufactured about his current persona. It just lacks any kind of authenticity from me. It feels insincere. I don't know what's striking you about DeChambeau when you get to see glimpses of him walking between the media centre and the first tee, etc. I'm fascinated by him, and I'm not sure what to make of him.
He's an interesting guy, to say the least, and I like him actually. I mean, in my interactions with him, very, very engaging. At the same time, very much an outsider, very much, idiosyncratic in his approach to everything, and I think kind of revels in that. I can find my own way here, and it's going to be revolutionary, and could come off as a know-it-all, especially in his younger days. And I think he wasn't popular with the other players, and he was easy to make fun of. So bullying is a strong phrase, but he definitely got the needle a lot, and was kind of shunned because he seemed like he was holding himself above everybody. Like, I know more. I'm the scientist. I'm the guy who's going to figure this game out. And people were waiting, like, okay, he'll be humbled. And I think in that way, not so much interpersonally, but as far as knowing this game and figuring it out, because that's a lifelong vain pursuit for anybody. But in any event, he I think didn't have a lot of and he kept it that way. He had his little inner circle, and that was even tumultuous sometimes. Some changes within and all that. And he was very close to a guy named Mike Shy, who was kind of his boyhood teacher, and they're estranged. He wasn't particularly close, and I say this with no disrespect, growing up with his dad. His dad obviously passed away, and Bryson, I think it really touched him those last couple of years. But at the same time, again, a maverick. And so someone, I think, socially has tried to craft his persona, because he knows that works now, and you can do that because with modern social media, and that's what people see and connect to, and I think it maybe it's not to get too far afield here, but it might have comforted him, as I'm accepted now. And he has his own group now on Live. Live's sort of a renegade group, and they're close knit because they're all outsiders in some ways. And he's, I think, got his group finally, and I think he's happier in that regard. But I'm not sure. I don't find it that off-putting what he's doing when he kind of creates these scenarios where they seem a little artificial, but they seem definitely calculated to increase his popularity. I think it makes him feel good. It makes him feel more like, I've got something to play for here. And my big takeaway with him, and I know I've been pontificating here a little too much probably, but my big takeaway with all these guys is I take them as golfers first. And as a golfer, he is really dedicated to being as good as he can be. Whatever approach he takes, it's all in the interest of getting better, and it's always about getting better. And I find him kind of a rough-hewn golfer to this day in some ways through the bag, but the things that he's improved at, or at least has excelled at, have been kind of revolutionary. I mean, it does work to hit the ball farther in a scoring sense. And he's pretty straight too. I mean, he's not just a wild guy. I mean, he doesn't hit a lot of fairways, but he doesn't miss by a lot. His shots are playable after he hits them, and he's often got a wedge in. So it's a good percentage play. His golf swing is a little brutish at times with the irons. He lacks those kind of the shot making nuances and little artistries and things, but it's very efficient. And yeah, his iron play was not great at the Masters, but I've seen him play pretty well with the irons. He hits his irons so far that maybe toning that down in terms of just towards accuracy would be the next level for him. But he had a terrible short game when he came out, and it's pretty good now.
Yeah.
Sand play was awful, and it's passably good. Made himself a very good putter. So I always think of him as someone who's just on an upward curve, a steep one, improving relative to someone that advanced in the game. He keeps improving, and so that makes him dangerous, and he's very driven. So I find him kind of harmless as far as any eccentricities, and he's not a dissembler. He's just someone who wants to be liked. He needs love.
Yeah.
And this is his way of getting it. And playing golf well is a big part of that as well.
With Scotty then, so probably undercooked a touch at the Masters, and with his 31 under at the Byron Nelson recently, that would suggest he's sharp again, and he's many people's favourites. So take it as read that he's an amazing golfer. And that is the headline here. And I hate myself for asking kind of the question I'm going to ask, but just in terms of what he represents for golf, a niche sport trying to burst through at times, like you saw McIlroy on Jimmy Fallon, even something that's kind of throwaway was that there was kind of an electricity in the crowd. It felt like he'd had this big crossover moment. I don't know what Scotty would have to do to have a crossover moment. He is often talked about as Tiger Woods in disguise, the way he plays so, sensationally. He's kind of just metronomic. I don't know how to phrase it in a fair way. Is he the number one golf needs? Is he ever going to be fascinating? Is there ever going to be 10,000 words in the New Yorker on Scotty? And it's unfair on him. He's a golfer first, but your impressions of him as a kind of representative of golf, one of golf's superstars, Scotty Scheffler.
Yes. Great question. I think too much is expected in terms of great players revealing everything about themselves. And I think he's used his natural personality and shyness, and it's not really shyness. I think it's just caution. And don't get ahead of yourself. Stay, one shot at a time, basically. Get good at golf, as good as you can be. And everything else flows from that. He's an intelligent guy. He's kind of fun to talk to.
Yeah,
I haven't had long conversations with him, but
I should say he's low level, kind of funny in press conferences and good. And
yes.
He's better than Tiger in a press conference.
Yes.
It's not like Tiger gave anything. It's more, I don't know what the best way to describe. When you're watching golf with somebody who doesn't watch golf.
Right, they go, yeah.
And certain players come on screen and they stop and they look. They look when Rory comes on screen. They look when Tiger comes on screen. Nobody who's not into golf says, shh, stop, I want to see this shot from Scotty. It's a charisma almost, or a presence on the golf course, which his excellence should have. But I don't know if it's getting people to tune in,
Yeah, I almost don't like pandering to that kind of. Not that you're pandering, but
I'm sure I am.
No, you're not. You're asking the question is like, what is the thing that makes someone magnetic? And if you love golf, to me, Scotty's magnetic. But if you are looking for extra stuff, it's antithetical to golf in most cases to be, very on the golf course demonstrative. And it just hurts you. It takes you out of the moment. So I think the great players, Jack was this way. Jack got to be very comfortable, in the spotlight. But he also always prioritized his golf. And I think people started to understand, look, he's doing something incredibly well here. Let him do it the way he does it.
Yeah. And
he'll smile sometimes. And he was engaging as he got older and got more comfortable. But we appreciate it in context with his main task. And because of that main task, we actually loved him more, I think, because it's beautiful to see someone do something so difficult so well. And that's how I look at Scotty. And I've seen his personality, and, he's a lovely guy. I love that word you guys use so often, lovely. He is. You feel like he's had a lot of love in his life. He's not hungry for attention. He's not needy. He's very comfortable with his people. Teddy, his caddy's a really funny, under the radar guy. It's a nice relationship that he shares with others that he trusts. Now, he also has, he's Christian, and I think there's, Bernhard Langer is Christian. You could say he's an automaton, but there's just more appreciation for everything he's done too. I don't say they're the same. I only say that can have a kind of blunting effect on your public persona a bit, because you're just not as you know, seeking adulation. You're doing it for a higher power, and you know, instead of just doing it for the people, and that's what people want, I think. And I think Rory connects that way. In some ways, Tiger did in the arena. He connected that way, but he was very private away from it. But it's amazing how much love Tiger engendered, and I have to say it was mostly about the excellence.
Yeah, it was.
He gave us this gift of seeing something done so well, and I think Scotty's close to that. So I think he's good for golf, honestly, because that's what golf is to me. You know, golf is a niche sport. I mean, to make it seem like, oh God, it's going to explode and the whole world's going to love golf. I've never understood, if somebody doesn't play golf at least a little bit, I don't understand how they could really enjoy watching it on television.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's beautiful, I guess, for the, you know, landscapes and stuff. But man, I mean, there's just a lot of guys standing around, you know, marking putts, and it's like, what's going on here? So you have to understand the task. And to me, that is what, in the end, should be the measure. But it's going to keep golf relatively small compared to the NFL or even, you know, soccer.
Yeah.
You know, it's just not an action sport. It's all internalized. But if you understand the challenge and you see somebody doing it well, you have to admire that person. And I sometimes probably am guilty of, you know, ascribing high character to being able to play golf well, but I still kind of believe it. I think it takes a lot of character. And so to deal with the game's frustrations and all the disappointments, and still overcome it. So I think Scotty's great at that. So I'm a Scotty fan, and you know, he happens to be the number one. I think there is a relationship to the way he is as a person to be a number one. I think he handles his situation, whatever it is, in a really controlled way, not an artificial way, a very genuine way, but it suits the sport that he's trying to excel at.
Yeah. Well, that's a very fair answer. Such an interesting contrast there, as we happen to talk about Bryson back-to-back and Scotty, that one of them needs love and is out there on YouTube garnering love, and Scotty just always had enough love. And again, not to constantly analyse these guys. Listen, I've kept enough of your time. I know you're out there for the Golf Channel and others, working hard. One last one. It's not a prediction, and it's not about the state of the game and live. That's for another week. But you strike me as somebody who loves the game and the intricacies of it, but also just loves watching the people and the different personalities. Which player, say of the current batch, aside from Rory, Scotty, Bryson, do you really like covering, or do you find yourself rooting for, or find yourself thinking about and analysing a lot? I'll let you choose if it's love or just I'm fascinated by, or somewhere in between.
You know, I'm guilty of, I focus too much on the very top players. And I'm not drawing a blank. I just don't want to give you a kind of a pat answer. You know, Jordan Spieth is alluring for a lot of reasons, golf reasons to me, because he is somewhat at a disadvantage technically. You know, he doesn't hit it quite as far and all those things. I just loved the way he plays during that streak in 2015. It really was creative and wonderful to see. So I root for him to come back. And I think everyone would like to see that. That's almost cliche. I think everybody wants to see Jordan. You know, I'm sorry, I'm right now.
No, he's a good one. And when we talk about charisma and presence on a golf course and a motive and on a golf, like, how could you not get sucked into his every shot?
I'm gonna hang up. You know, we're gonna end this thing, and I'm gonna go, geez, there's three guys I should have mentioned, and I'm not thinking of them right now. It's just okay. You know, historically, I love the players that got the most out of themselves and played with a certain real courage and verve. I really liked Nick Faldo as a golfer. I really thought he was an artist and underrated in that regard.
An artist? And, geez, I would think of Faldo as like and I didn't live through his era, but he's talked about as a technician.
Yeah, absolutely. He was a technician, but you know that he made himself a complete golfer in a way that you know was not, to me, robotic. It was all about feel and all about finding the way, you know, through a really a minefield of instructional difficulty to try to add those things almost mid-career with David Ledbetter. And I just thought he came close to conquering, really fulfilling his potential, which is so hard to do, getting everything out of it. So I love the guys who I feel like are getting the most out of everything they have and going about it intelligently and going about it with love and passion, because that's what it takes. Finally,
Well,
you have to really care.
Sorry, can I jump in there? You must like Padraig Harrington. Everything you've just said.
Oh
there.
yes, thank you.
There you
I
go.
love Padraig. I love him. Thank you. I actually love him because, and I hardly know him, but I like his Hall of Fame speech. I love the way he loves golf and the way he transmits it to everyone. And I think he's the best salesman for golf almost that I can imagine. And I love those videos that he does from his place in Ireland. It's really, it's a great, it makes, what was that movie? The Banshees, what was it called?
Inisherin.
Yeah, I love that movie and the scenes of that. And when I see Padraig hitting balls out there, it makes me think of that movie for some reason. It just idealized golf so beautifully.
It's been so good to have you on. Thank you so much. I know it's a really busy week for you, so it's very much appreciated. Have a good one out there, Jaime Diaz, and thanks again.
Thank you, Joe. I really enjoyed it. Appreciate it.